A story you won't forget. Stay until the end. What if the very thing you tried to escape your whole life suddenly came knocking at your door? Elena thought she had outrun her past. A single mother working tirelessly to give her son a better future. She had spent years keeping her head down, staying invisible, and avoiding the ghosts that once haunted her. But fate had other plans. A lost wallet, a powerful CEO, and a name she never wanted to hear again. James Sterling. What started as an act of honesty soon unraveled a tangled web of secrets, betrayal, and a past she could no longer ignore. With danger closing in, Elena must decide. Will she keep running, or will she finally stand her ground? And in the midst of all the chaos, can she open her heart to the one person who refuses to let her fight alone? This is a story of survival, redemption, and love that defies all odds. A gripping, heartwarming journey that will keep you hooked until the very last word. But before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more incredible stories like this one. Ready? Let's begin. A struggling single mom returned a lost wallet, and the billionaire owner changed her life forever. The grocery store was nearly empty, its fluorescent lights humming softly as Elena wiped down the register counter. The evening shift was always quiet, with only a handful of last-minute shoppers rushing in to grab essentials before closing. She preferred it that way. It gave her a few moments of peace before she had to hurry home to Lucas, her 7-year-old son, who would no doubt be waiting eagerly by the window for her return. Elena adjusted her apron and let out a tired sigh. It had been another long day, but she had grown accustomed to exhaustion. It had become her constant companion ever since she had taken on the role of both mother and father, provider and protector. She glanced at the clock. 10:05 p.m. Just a few more minutes and she could head home. As she turned to gather her things, her eyes landed on something unusual near the checkout counter. A leather wallet, thick, elegant, and clearly expensive, sat unattended on the counter. Someone must have left it behind in a hurry. Elena hesitated for a moment before picking it up, her fingers running over the smooth surface of the high-quality leather. She opened it cautiously, half expecting to find nothing more than a few dollar bills and an ID. Instead, she was met with a sight that made her eyebrows raise. Crisp $100 bills stacked neatly in one compartment, along with multiple platinum credit cards. But it was the name on the business card tucked inside that truly caught her attention. Michael Thompson, CEO. Thompson Enterprises. Elena inhaled sharply. Thompson Enterprises was not just one of the biggest financial firms in the city. It was a powerhouse in the industry, managing billions in assets and influencing markets on a global scale. Its CEO, Michael Thompson, was often featured in business magazines and financial news, known for his ruthless decision-making and unparalleled success. To many, he was a symbol of ambition and power, untouchable, unshakable. And now somehow, his wallet had ended up in her hands. She had seen the name in newspapers, heard it mentioned on television, and once, a long time ago, in an entirely different world, she had brushed shoulders with men like him. That world, however, was one she had long left behind. Her gaze lingered on the name for a moment, stirring memories she had tried to bury. She once knew men like Michael Thompson, men who moved through the world with power and ease, their wealth acting as a shield against the struggles of ordinary people. She had walked among them once, had spoken their language, understood their ambitions. But that was a lifetime ago. Now she was just a woman trying to survive. With a sharp exhale, she snapped the wallet shut. A lesser person might have been tempted. After all, she barely made enough to get by, and the money inside could easily cover rent, groceries, and more. But Elena wasn't that kind of person. She had her pride and she had Lucas to think about. She would never let her son see her as anything but honest, no matter how hard life got. Determined, she tucked the wallet into her bag. She would return it first thing in the morning. Yet an uneasy feeling settled in her chest. What if this was more than just a lost wallet? What if someone was already looking for it? A man as powerful as Michael Thompson would surely have people handling such matters. She shook off the thought, but a nagging voice in the back of her mind told her this was the beginning of something she wasn't prepared for. A sudden knock on the glass doors startled her. Turning her head, she saw her coworker, Angela, waving at her from outside. Elena, you done? Elena nodded, quickly locking up the register. Yeah, just finishing up. Angela grinned. Good, let's get out of here. It's too damn cold to stand around. Elena chuckled, slinging her bag over her shoulder. The streets were nearly deserted at this hour, the occasional car passing by casting elongated shadows across the pavement. The city had a way of feeling both vast and suffocating, a paradox she had learned to live with. She kept her steps brisk, her thoughts racing with the possibilities of what tomorrow might bring. As they stepped outside, the crisp night air wrapped around them. She pulled her coat tighter, her fingers brushing against the weight of the wallet in her bag. She had no idea that returning it would set off a chain of events that would pull her back into a world she had desperately tried to escape. A world of power, deception, and a past that refused to stay buried. The morning sunlight streamed through the smudged windows of Elena's tiny apartment as she tied Lucas's shoelaces. The 7-year-old wiggled impatiently, eager to get to school, oblivious to the weight of the decision his mother was about to make. Be good today, okay? She said, ruffling his messy brown hair. Lucas grinned up at her. Always am. She kissed his forehead, then hurried him out the door, watching as he ran toward the school bus. Once he was safely on board, Elena took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The wallet sat in her bag, heavier than it should have been. Returning it was the right thing to do, but something told her that once she stepped into Thompson Enterprises, her life would never be the same again. The towering glass skyscraper of Thompson Enterprises loomed before her, its sheer scale and modern design a stark contrast to the small grocery store where she worked. She hesitated at the entrance, gripping the strap of her bag tighter before pushing forward. The security guards barely spared her a glance, too accustomed to visitors scurrying in and out of the building. Inside, the lobby was all sleek marble and polished steel. Business professionals in tailored suits moved with a sense of purpose, each one seemingly absorbed in their own high-stakes world. Elena walked up to the receptionist, a well-groomed woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper demeanor. I'm here to return something to Mr. Thompson, Elena said, placing the wallet on the counter. The receptionist barely glanced at it. Do you have an appointment? No, but... Then I'm afraid Mr. Thompson is very busy. You can leave it here. Elena wasn't surprised by the dismissal, but something in her rebelled against simply leaving. The woman had already turned her attention to her computer, clearly expecting her to leave, but Elena had faced worse obstacles before. She picked up the wallet and, without another word, walked toward the bank of elevators. Ma'am, you can't... The elevator doors slid shut before the receptionist could finish her sentence. Elena exhaled slowly, her heart pounding as the car ascended. This was a reckless move, but she wasn't about to be turned away by bureaucracy. When the doors opened, she stepped into a quiet, spacious hallway. It was lined with offices, but the one at the far end, marked with a simple, Michael Thompson, CEO, stood out. She walked toward it, her every step measured. She paused just outside the door, inhaling deeply as her fingers hovered over the polished wood. A knot tightened in her stomach, the weight of old memories pressing against her ribs. She had dealt with powerful men before, men who could make or break a life with a single decision. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She squared her shoulders, knocked once, and pushed the door open. Michael Thompson was seated behind a massive glass desk, engrossed in reviewing some documents. He barely glanced up at first, assuming she was just another assistant. But when she strode in, placed the wallet on his desk, and met his gaze without hesitation, his brow furrowed. You must be Elena, he said, his voice smooth but laced with quiet authority. She nodded. You left this behind at the grocery store. Michael leaned back in his chair, regarding her with interest. There was something different about her, something that set her apart from the countless others he encountered daily. She wasn't intimidated by him, nor was she trying to impress him. Instead, she met his gaze with an unshaken confidence that intrigued him. He was used to people either fawning over his wealth or cowering under his authority, but Elena did neither. He could tell there was a story behind those guarded eyes, one that he suddenly found himself wanting to unravel. And you came all the way here to return it? Elena crossed her arms. I figured you'd want it back. His sharp blue eyes studied her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he reached inside and counted the money. When he was satisfied, he looked at her again, something unreadable in his expression. I assume everything is intact. A humorless smirk crossed her lips. I may be poor, but I never take what isn't mine. Michael's lips quirked slightly, but he didn't apologize for his suspicion. That's rare. I wouldn't know. The air between them was thick with something unspoken, curiosity, maybe even a challenge. For the first time in years, Elena found herself standing across from a man who could look right through her, and yet she didn't flinch. Michael tapped his fingers against the desk. You're an unusual woman, Miss Elena. She shrugged. I get that a lot. He didn't respond right away, his gaze flickering over her, assessing, calculating. Finally, he reached into his drawer, pulled out a business card, and slid it toward her. If you ever need something, anything, call me. Elena didn't take it. Instead, she met his gaze with unwavering steadiness, her lips pressing into a firm line. She had encountered men like him before, men who wielded power as easily as they breathed, expecting the world to bend at their will. But she wasn't here to play his game. Taking that card would mean accepting some invisible debt, stepping into a world she had no desire to return to. She let the silence stretch, allowing him to feel the weight of her refusal before she finally spoke. I doubt we'll cross paths again. I doubt we'll cross paths again. Michael chuckled, low and amused. We'll see about that. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving behind more than just a returned wallet. She left behind an impression, one that Michael Thompson wouldn't forget anytime soon. The moment Elena stepped out of Thompson Enterprises, she felt the weight of Michael Thompson's gaze still lingering on her. The air outside was crisp, yet she found herself flushed with a strange mixture of relief and tension. As she made her way down the bustling streets, she forced herself to shake off the unease that had settled in her chest. She had done the right thing. Returning the wallet was the only logical choice. Yet as she clutched her bag tighter, a sense of unease settled over her like a heavy fog. This was more than just a simple act of honesty. It was an invitation for questions, for scrutiny, and she had spent years ensuring no one had a reason to look too closely at her life. Now she had placed herself right in the path of a man who thrived on uncovering secrets. Would he see through the carefully constructed walls she had built? Would this simple act unravel everything she had worked so hard to protect? Yet as she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she just stepped into something much bigger than herself. The way Michael had studied her, as if trying to unravel a puzzle, left her unsettled. She had spent years carefully avoiding notice, blending into the background, and now with a single act, she had put herself back under a spotlight she never wanted to stand in again. But logic had no place in the world she had once been a part of, and something told her that Michael Thompson wasn't the kind of man who let go of mysteries easily. Back at the grocery store, the familiar scent of fresh produce and cleaning supplies greeted her, grounding her in a reality far different from the pristine, intimidating halls of Thompson Enterprises. Angela, her coworker, raised an eyebrow as Elena slid behind the register. Well, how did it go? Angela asked, curiosity evident in her tone. Elena shrugged, feigning nonchalance. I gave it back, that's all. Angela scoffed. Please, a man like that? Bet he didn't just take his wallet and say thanks. Elena hesitated before responding. He was interested. In you. In why I returned it. Angela hummed, her gaze sharp. You should be careful with men like him, Elena. Rich men don't just walk away from things they find interesting. Elena knew that all too well. Rich men had a tendency to believe the world and the people in it were pieces to be moved according to their will. She had once been caught in the orbit of such power, manipulated under the guise of affection, made to feel as if her choices were hers when in reality, they had been carefully orchestrated. She remembered the whispered promises, the unspoken debts, and the suffocating realization that her freedom had been an illusion. Never again. She had learned to recognize the signs, and Michael Thompson, with his calculating gaze and effortless authority, bore all the hallmarks of a man used to having control. She had spent years ensuring no one ever had control over her again. She had seen it before, lived it before, and she had vowed never to be anyone's pawn again. After her shift, she returned home to find Lucas on the floor, surrounded by crayons and sheets of paper. His latest masterpiece was a colorful depiction of the city skyline, with two stick figures standing on opposite sides of a bridge. "Mom, look, it's us!" Lucas announced proudly, pointing at the figures. Elena crouched beside him, tracing a finger over the bridge. "And what's this?" "That's the road we have to cross," he said seriously. "But we can do it together." Her heart clenched at the simple wisdom of his words. If only life were as straightforward as a child's drawing. Later that night, as she tucked Lucas into bed, Elena allowed herself a brief moment of vulnerability. She pulled out an old hidden drawer beneath her dresser. Inside, buried beneath faded photographs and folded papers, lay a picture she hadn't looked at in years. It was of her, standing beside a man whose presence alone made her stomach twist with unease. James Sterling, a name she had sworn never to utter again. The sight of his face, even in a faded photograph, sent an icy chill down her spine. James Sterling had once controlled every aspect of her life, his influence stretching into every decision she made. He had dictated what she wore, who she spoke to, and even the tone in which she responded. Every financial decision, every career move, every step forward had been under his careful orchestration, cloaked in the illusion of guidance and support. She had once believed he cared for her, that his involvement in her life was out of concern rather than control. But she had learned the truth the hard way. Freedom was something she never truly had while he was in the picture. The moment she had tried to make a decision for herself, to carve her own path, she had seen his true nature, and it had terrified her. She had clawed her way out of his grasp, started over, built a life that was hers alone. But deep down she knew, no matter how far she ran, the past never truly stayed buried. A part of her past that she had desperately buried, and yet, in the depths of her gut, she knew it was only a matter of time before that past came knocking once more. The next morning, Elena moved through her routine with deliberate calm. She made breakfast, packed Lucas's lunch, and walked him to the bus stop, her hands steady despite the unease simmering beneath her skin. The photograph of James Sterling still burned in her mind. She hadn't looked at it in years, and yet one glance had been enough to pull her back into a world she had fought so hard to leave behind. She took a deep breath as the bus drove away, watching her son's small face disappear behind the tinted windows. A wave of unease swept over her, the familiar fear creeping back into her bones. She had spent years ensuring their safety, keeping their lives small, unremarkable, hidden. Yet here she was, standing in the open, feeling exposed. A pang of guilt twisted in her chest. Lucas was growing up fast, and she had done everything to shield him from the shadows of her past. But no matter how careful she was, danger had a way of creeping back into her life. She pressed a hand to her temple, willing herself to stay strong. For him. Lucas was her reason for everything. No matter what ghosts from the past resurfaced, she would keep him safe. She had to. By the time she arrived at the grocery store, the morning rush was already underway. She greeted customers with a practiced smile, slipping seamlessly into the familiar rhythm of scanning items and bagging groceries. But the moment of peace was short-lived. A man lingered near the entrance, just outside her line of sight. His posture was too casual, his gaze too focused. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She had learned long ago to read people, to recognize danger before it struck. This man wasn't here by accident. He wasn't just standing idly. He was studying her, his stance too controlled, too intentional. Her instincts flared, honed from years of looking over her shoulder. He wasn't just some random passer-by. He was here for her. He wasn't a customer. He wasn't shopping. He was watching. Elena's pulse quickened. She turned her attention back to the register, forcing her expression into neutrality. It could be nothing. Maybe she was just being paranoid. Angela nudged her with an elbow. "That guy's been standing there for a while. You know him." Elena swallowed hard. "No?" "Well, he knows you." As if on cue, the man stepped forward and casually placed a plain white envelope on the counter. He met Elena's eyes for only a second, just long enough for her to see the warning in them, before turning and walking away. Elena didn't move. She didn't touch the envelope. The register beeped insistently, a customer waiting for her to scan their items, but she couldn't hear anything past the roar in her ears. "Elena?" Angela's voice cut through the noise. She forced herself to move, to finish the transaction, to smile as if everything was normal. But inside, her mind raced. Was this a warning? A message? Or worse, had she been found? Every instinct in her screamed to run, to disappear again. But she couldn't. Not with Lucas. Not now. Only when she had a spare moment did she slide the envelope off the counter and into her pocket, fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against the paper. She didn't open it until her shift ended. Alone in the break room, she carefully unfolded the envelope, her breath hitching as she pulled out the single photograph inside. Lucas. A candid shot of him playing in the park, his laughter frozen in time. The innocence in his expression, the pure joy on his face. It was a stark contrast to the ice spreading through her veins. Whoever took this photo had been close, too close. They had been watching him while she had been oblivious. She clenched her jaw, her breathing shallow. If they thought they could use her son to manipulate her, they had underestimated just how fiercely she would fight back. Beneath it, a message in precise, familiar handwriting. "Be careful. We're still watching." Her breath hitched. The words were simple, but the implications were devastating. How long had they been watching? How much did they know? A cold realization settled over her. She wasn't just being paranoid. The past wasn't lingering in shadows, it had already caught up to her. Elena's stomach dropped. Her grip on the paper tightened until her knuckles turned white. She knew that handwriting. She knew exactly who had sent this. James Sterling. The past hadn't just come knocking, it had walked right through the door. Elena sat in the break room long after her shift had ended, staring at the photograph of Lucas in her trembling hands. The image blurred as unshed tears gathered in her eyes. Memories of sleepless nights and whispered promises to her son surfaced, a reminder of why she had spent years avoiding the shadows of her past. But now those shadows had found her again. The weight of the message scrawled beneath it pressed heavily against her chest. She had spent years running, carefully building a life of anonymity. But James Sterling had found her. Her first instinct was to pack up and disappear again. It was the only way she knew how to survive. But Lucas deserved better than a life spent constantly looking over their shoulders. She had promised herself that this time, she would stand her ground. A knock at the break room door startled her. Angela peeked in. "Hey, you okay? You've been in here a while." Elena forced a smile, folding the photograph and tucking it into her pocket. "Yeah, just tired. Long shift." Angela studied her for a moment before nodding. "All right, just checking. See you tomorrow?" Elena nodded, but as she left the store and stepped out into the cold night air, she knew that tomorrow was uncertain. She barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustling of leaves outside her window sent her heart hammering in her chest. Shadows danced against the walls, conjuring memories she had spent years trying to suppress, nights of hurried escapes, whispered threats, and the suffocating grip of fear wrapping around her like an iron cage. She had thought she had left that life behind, but now it clawed its way back, refusing to be ignored. She kept checking on Lucas, ensuring he was safely tucked in, his steady breathing the only thing grounding her in reality. Even in his peaceful slumber, she felt the burden of her choices weighing down on her, the fragile sense of safety she had built threatening to crumble beneath her feet. She kept checking on Lucas, ensuring he was safely tucked in, his steady breathing the only thing grounding her in reality. Fear curled in her stomach like a vice, and yet beneath it, a flicker of resolve burned. She was done running. By morning, exhaustion weighed on her, but she pushed through it for Lucas. She couldn't let him see her fear. She dropped him off at school as usual, lingering a few extra seconds to watch him disappear inside. Then instead of heading to work, she found herself standing outside the imposing glass tower of Thompson Enterprises. Michael Thompson might be the only person who could help her. She wasn't sure what she expected when she walked through the entrance. Maybe skepticism, maybe indifference. But when she was ushered into Michael's office, His piercing blue eyes locked onto her with something else, curiosity. "Miss Elena," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I wasn't expecting to see you again so soon." Elena placed the photograph of Lucas on his desk. "I need your help." Michael picked up the photo, his fingers lingering over the edges. His brow furrowed slightly as he examined the image, the weight of its implications settling in. He had seen countless threats in his line of work, but this was personal. This was something different. He traced the outline of the boy's face with his thumb, his mind already racing through possibilities. Was this a message for him, or was Elena simply caught in a storm much bigger than she realized? Either way, something about it didn't sit right with him. His eyes darkened as he studied it, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. There was something in his expression, recognition perhaps, a silent understanding of the weight that came with such a threat. When he finally looked up, there was no amusement left in his gaze, only sharp calculation. "Who sent this?" "James Sterling." That name changed everything. Michael's relaxed demeanor vanished, replaced by something colder, more calculating. He knew who Sterling was. "And what exactly do you want from me?" he asked. Elena hesitated for only a second before she answered. "Protection. For me and my son." Michael leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. "You know I don't do favors for free, Miss Elena." His voice was smooth, but there was an unmistakable edge beneath it, a challenge that made her spine stiffen. She had expected resistance, but she wasn't prepared for the feeling that she had just walked into a game where the stakes were much higher than she had anticipated. She swallowed hard. She had expected this. "Then name your price." A slow smirk curled his lips, but his eyes remained sharp. Elena's stomach twisted. She had seen this expression before, worn by men who played dangerous games with power. It wasn't amusement. It was calculation. Her palms felt clammy as she clenched them at her sides, forcing herself to remain steady under his gaze. Did he see her as a pawn, a piece to be moved in whatever unseen strategy he was formulating? Or was there something more beneath his cold exterior? The uncertainty sent a chill down her spine, but she refused to let him see it. "Work for me. Take a job at Thompson Enterprises." Elena's heart pounded. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering an exchange. A deal with a man she barely knew. But what choice did she have? After a long pause, she nodded. "Fine, I'll take the job." Michael extended his hand. "Then we have an agreement." As she shook his hand, Elena knew that she had just made a deal that could change everything. Elena spent her first week at Thompson Enterprises keeping her head down, absorbing everything around her like a sponge. The sterile office environment was a stark contrast to the grocery store she had worked at for years. Now she found herself surrounded by polished executives, hushed conversations, and the occasional glances thrown her way. It felt as though she had stepped into a world she no longer belonged to, a world that once would have been hers, if things had been different. It wasn't glamorous, just a low-level administrative role, but it provided stability, something she hadn't had in years. More importantly, it placed her under Michael's protection, though she wasn't sure what that truly meant yet. Michael, for the most part, kept his distance, though Elena felt his presence lingering at the edges. She couldn't decide if it was meant to be reassuring or unsettling. At times, his watchfulness felt like a silent form of protection, an unspoken acknowledgement that she was under his safeguard. But at other moments, it felt calculated, like he was studying her, waiting for her to make a move. Was she just another piece on his chessboard, or was there something more? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making her question whether she had exchanged one form of control for another. He had a way of watching without making it obvious, his sharp gaze dissecting everything about her. It wasn't just professional curiosity. It was as if he was trying to unravel her secrets, to understand why she had suddenly appeared in his world. He had given her the job, but he hadn't explained why, nor had he brought up James Sterling again. But Elena wasn't naive. Men like Michael Thompson didn't make deals without expecting something in return. The days passed in a blur of paperwork and carefully measured interactions. She avoided unnecessary conversations with coworkers, but she knew whispers followed her. An unassuming woman with no corporate background, landing a job at one of the city's top financial firms? People noticed, even if they didn't say it outright. Then late one evening, when most employees had gone home, Elena found herself alone at her desk, the rhythmic clicking of her keyboard the only sound in the vast empty office. The glow from her screen illuminated her weary face, exhaustion and settling in. She was just about to shut down for the night when a notification popped up. A new email. A new email notification flashed across her screen. The sudden chime made her flinch, a spike of unease running down her spine. Her fingers hesitated over the mouse as she stared at the screen, her breath coming faster. No subject line, no sender name, just a single message. A wave of nausea twisted in her stomach, her mind already screaming at her not to click. But she had to know. Did you really think you could disappear? Elena's breath caught. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind racing. A second later, another message appeared. You can't hide from me, Elena. James Sterling. Her heart pounded as she glanced around the nearly empty office. The soft hum of the air conditioning suddenly felt too loud, the shadows stretching across the floor appearing darker than before. She instinctively pressed a hand to her stomach, grounding herself against the panic threatening to rise. Was he watching her? Was this just another mind game? No one was paying attention, yet she felt exposed, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. A cold sweat formed at the base of her neck. She clicked on the message, but there was no reply button, no traceable email address. It was as if it had appeared out of thin air. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text message. Unknown number. Check your inbox. Her stomach twisted. She already had. For a brief, reckless moment, she considered going to Michael. But what would that accomplish? He had given her a job, not his loyalty. Instead, she forced herself to breathe, to steady her hands. She had been in worse situations before. James wanted her afraid. He wanted her to run. She wouldn't. Elena closed the email, shut down her computer, and grabbed her coat. But the weight of the words clung to her. A familiar sense of dread crept over her, wrapping around her like a suffocating fog. Fear pulsed through her veins, but beneath it simmered something else. Anger. She had spent years building a life away from James Sterling, away from his manipulations and control. And now, with just a few words, he had managed to slip back into her mind like a ghost she could never fully exorcise. She exhaled sharply, her fingers tightening around her coat. No, she wouldn't let him dictate her fear. She wasn't that powerless woman anymore. If James thought he could push her back into the shadows, he was wrong. She moved carefully, her senses heightened, as if expecting James Sterling to materialize from the shadows at any moment. The city outside felt colder, the streetlights casting elongated, eerie silhouettes. Every footstep behind her felt too close, every rustle of the wind too deliberate. As she made her way home, she knew this was only the beginning of something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She didn't look back as she walked out of the building, but the weight of her past followed her, lurking just over her shoulder, whispering that this was only the beginning. Elena moved through the next few days with guarded precision, her nerves constantly on edge. The weight of exhaustion clung to her, an ever-present reminder of the danger lurking just beyond her reach. Every night she triple-checked the locks on her apartment, lying awake in the darkness, listening for sounds that didn't belong. She knew James Sterling was playing his game again, but this time, she wasn't sure if she had the strength to keep up. She kept her head down at work, trying to blend in, but the weight of James Sterling's threats sat heavily on her shoulders. Every time her phone buzzed, her pulse spiked. Every unfamiliar face in the office made her question if she was truly safe. Michael had noticed. He always noticed. His sharp blue eyes tracked her movements whenever she entered a room, his gaze assessing, searching for the cracks in her carefully maintained composure. He wasn't just concerned. He was waiting, watching for the moment she would finally let him in. "You look like you haven't slept in days," he remarked one evening as she was finishing up work. Elena glanced up from her desk, startled. She had been so lost in thought that she hadn't realized he was standing there. He leaned against the doorway of her office, his piercing blue eyes studying her in that way that made her feel both exposed and protected. "I'm fine," she said quickly, pushing back her exhaustion. He wasn't convinced. "You're lying." She exhaled, her fingers tightening around the pen in her hand. "Why do you care?" Michael walked further into the room, stopping just before her desk. Because you're my employee, and because someone like James Sterling doesn't just send messages without a plan. His words sent a chill down her spine. How do you know about James? Michael tilted his head slightly. I make it my business to know things that could pose a risk to me or my company. A flicker of irritation flared in her chest. So that's what I am? A risk? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her as if weighing his response. You're more than that. The air between them shifted, something unspoken lingering in the silence. Elena hated the way her heart reacted to his presence. How despite everything, despite the walls she had built around herself, Michael Thompson made her feel seen. She forced herself to look away, the tension in her shoulders betraying her words. I can handle James on my own. The words felt hollow, even to her. A part of her wanted to believe it, to convince herself that she hadn't lost control, but deep down, the fear was gnawing away at her resolve. Michael let out a quiet laugh. Can you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who's been running for too long. His words struck a nerve. She had been running, hadn't she? For years. But the idea of trusting Michael, of letting him in, felt just as dangerous as facing James head on. I don't need your help, she said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. Michael's expression darkened. That's your pride talking, and pride gets people hurt. She opened her mouth to argue, but the weight of exhaustion pressed down on her. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had been fighting alone for too long. Let me help you, Elena, Michael said, his voice softer now. Not because I have to, because I want to. Her defenses wavered. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever wanted to fight for her. Before she could answer, the office phone rang, slicing through the charged silence like a knife. The shrill sound jolted her, her pulse spiking as dread curled in her stomach. She reached for the receiver with a steady hand, but inside she felt like she was walking straight into a trap. She exhaled, shaking off the moment, reaching for the receiver. Elena speaking. A cold, familiar voice slid through the line. You should have left when you had the chance. James Sterling. The blood drained from her face, her fingers tightening around the phone. She felt Michael move closer, his presence grounding her. Elena, he murmured, sensing the shift in her demeanor. She swallowed, forcing herself to respond, to keep her voice steady. What do you want, James? A dark chuckle on the other end. You know exactly what I want, and you know this is far from over. The line went dead. Elena sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Michael reached out, slowly prying the phone from her grip, his touch both firm and grounding. That's it, he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. You're done handling this alone. His presence was a steady force against the storm raging inside her, and for the first time in years, she felt the walls around her cracking. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to fight this battle by herself anymore. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe that maybe she didn't have to. Elena didn't sleep that night. She paced her small apartment, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't silence. The weight of James Sterling's voice still echoed in her mind, his chilling words playing over and over like a broken record. The past had found her again, wrapping its cold fingers around her throat, threatening to pull her under. You should have left when you had the chance. She sat by her bedroom window, staring out at the city, her fingers wrapped tightly around a cup of tea she had no intention of drinking. She had spent years looking over her shoulder, but this was different. James wasn't just watching, he was making his move. By morning, she forced herself to push past the exhaustion. She couldn't afford to break down, not now. Lucas needed her strong, and Michael, she wasn't sure what Michael meant to her yet, but she knew one thing. He wasn't going to let her handle this alone. When she arrived at work, Michael was waiting for her in his office. He didn't say a word as she stepped inside, just gestured for her to sit. Did you sleep? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Elena shook her head. Not really. Michael exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, his frustration barely concealed. We need to talk about James. His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a quiet urgency that told her he had already been working behind the scenes. Michael Thompson didn't like surprises, and James Sterling was a wild card that had now infiltrated his carefully controlled world. She had known this conversation was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. "What do you know?" Michael leaned forward, his eyes sharp and unyielding. "I know that James Sterling isn't a man who gives up easily. If he wants something, he takes it. And right now, he wants you." A shiver ran down her spine, but she refused to let it show. "I'm not his to take." Michael's gaze darkened. "I won't let him." Elena wanted to believe him, but deep down, she knew the kind of power James wielded. He had destroyed lives before. He had nearly destroyed hers. Before she could respond, Michael's office door burst open with such force that the papers on his desk fluttered. One of his assistants stood there breathless, her wide eyes darting between them. Panic radiated from her, and Elena knew in that instant that whatever had happened, it was worse than she had imagined. "Sir, you need to see this." Michael took the tablet she handed him, his expression hardening as he read whatever was on the screen. He turned the device toward Elena. She felt the blood drain from her face. On the screen was a leaked news article, one that detailed a financial scandal from years ago. A scandal that had ruined Elena's career. But it wasn't just a rehash of the old story. It was a carefully curated attack. The article painted her as complicit, as someone who had profited from corruption and then disappeared to evade justice. Twisted half-truths were laced between the lines, and the implications were damning. The headline read, "Former Sterling financial prodigy resurfaces amidst corporate controversy." Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. Every word a dagger to her chest. The accusations, the blame, the subtle hints that she had been involved in the corruption. James had made his move. He had exposed her past, twisted the narrative, and now the world was watching. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "This isn't happening." Michael's jaw clenched. "He's trying to force you into a corner." Elena could barely breathe. She had spent years rebuilding her life, staying out of the spotlight, and now in a single moment, James had dragged her back into the darkness. "I have to go," she muttered, standing abruptly. Michael stood too, blocking her path. "Where?" "I don't know," she admitted. I need to think." She pushed past him, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Panic, rage, betrayal. She barely registered the way his fingers brushed against her arm, a silent plea for her to stop, to talk to him. But she couldn't. Not now. Not when her entire world was unraveling at the seams, and the ghosts of her past had finally caught up to her. She couldn't think, couldn't breathe in that office. The walls were closing in, and she needed air. As she stepped into the elevator, the weight of betrayal settled over her. James had won this round, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to fight back. Elena walked aimlessly through the crowded streets, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the chaos James had unleashed on her life. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if she were wading through the remnants of a past she had tried so desperately to outrun. She could feel the weight of stares, real or imagined, pressing against her. Her name was in the headlines again, her story twisted into a narrative she had no control over. Every step felt heavy, each breath labored as if the world was closing in around her. The whispers of passers-by seemed to echo in her ears, and though they weren't talking about her, the paranoia James had instilled in her made it feel as if they were. She needed clarity, she needed answers, and there was only one place to get them. Without thinking, her feet carried her to an upscale apartment complex, the kind that screamed power and influence. She had been here before, though never by choice. The security at the front barely spared her a glance before letting her through, proving her instincts right. James was expecting her. The elevator ride up was suffocating. The walls felt too close, the air thick with the ghosts of past encounters. Her own reflection in the polished steel doors seemed foreign. Her eyes were lined with exhaustion, her expression a mixture of determination and dread. Every floor that ticked by heightened the tension coiling in her stomach. By the time the doors slid open, she had steeled herself for what was to come. When the doors finally slid open, she forced herself to step forward. James Sterling was waiting in the lavish penthouse, lounging on a leather armchair with a glass of whiskey in hand. He looked exactly as she remembered, calculating, smug, and completely in control. "I knew you'd come," he said smoothly, taking a sip of his drink. "You always do." Elena clenched her fists, resisting the urge to throw something at him. "Why are you doing this? What do you really want?" James sighed as if she were exhausting him, but there was something sharper beneath the feigned exasperation. "Come on, Elena. We both know the past doesn't just disappear. It lingers, festering in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. You knew this was coming. You always knew I wouldn't let you walk away so easily. It lingers, waiting for the perfect moment to remind us of what we left behind." She took a step closer, her heart pounding. "You framed me. You destroyed my career. And now you want to finish what you started?" He tilted his head, considering her words. "I simply ensured the pieces fell where they needed to. And now you're exactly where I want you." Elena's blood ran cold. "You're sick." James chuckled, setting his glass down. "Perhaps, but I'm also a realist. And you, my dear, are a loose end that needs tying up." Before she could respond, the penthouse door burst open with a force that rattled the paintings on the wall. Michael stood in the doorway, his expression lethal, his presence radiating controlled fury. He didn't hesitate, his sharp gaze locking onto James with a warning that needed no words. The air in the room shifted, heavy with unspoken animosity. "Step away from her," he commanded. James merely smirked. "Ah, the knight in shining armor. I was wondering when you'd show up." Elena's breath hitched as Michael moved closer, his body a shield between her and James. "This ends now," Michael said, his voice cold and unwavering. James exhaled, clearly amused. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" "You see, Michael, the truth is on my side. Elena's past is out there now, and you can't change that." Michael's gaze didn't waver. "No, but I can make sure the world knows the real story." Elena looked between them, her pulse racing. "What do you mean?" Michael pulled out a folder and tossed it onto the table. "I did my own digging, and I found the proof that exonerates you, Elena. Documents, transactions, emails, everything that shows you were set up. James orchestrated the entire scandal to protect himself, and now I have the evidence to prove it." James's expression faltered for the first time, his jaw tightening. "You have nothing." Michael's smirk was razor sharp. "I have everything. Documents, witness statements, bank transactions, all leading back to you. And it's already on its way to the press. By this time tomorrow, your empire will start crumbling piece by piece. Tell me, James, how does it feel knowing you finally lost control?" Elena felt a rush of emotions, disbelief, relief, and a flicker of hope she hadn't allowed herself in years. James's mask of arrogance cracked. "You think this will stop me?" Michael didn't flinch. "I think this is just the beginning of your downfall." Elena turned to James, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "You don't own me anymore. You never did." For the first time, James had nothing to say. As Michael took her hand, leading her out of the penthouse, Elena felt a surge of something unfamiliar, relief. But it was more than that. It was freedom, true freedom, the kind that came not from running, but from standing her ground. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that she was more than the scars of her past, that she could finally reclaim her future. And this time, she wouldn't let anyone take it away. The morning after James Sterling's downfall, the world woke up to a new reality, one where justice had finally caught up to a man who had manipulated, deceived, and destroyed for years. The internet buzzed with discussions, media outlets flooded the airwaves with breaking news, and financial analysts speculated about the repercussions of his downfall. Headlines screamed with revelations of his corruption, each detail meticulously exposed by the media. The truth had finally come to light, and with it, the weight on Elena's shoulders lifted ever so slightly. But she knew this wasn't over yet. Elena sat in Michael's office, her fingers curled around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions: fear, relief, exhaustion. Now, with the dust settling, she found herself grappling with the unfamiliar sensation of having won. For so long, she had lived in the shadows of her past, convinced that no matter how far she ran, James would always find her. But now, for the first time, she had the power. She hadn't slept, but this time, it wasn't fear keeping her awake. It was uncertainty. The past was behind her, but the future remained a question mark. Michael entered, setting his phone down with a satisfied smirk. There was an undeniable energy to him, a quiet victory reflected in his posture. He had seen men like James fall before, but this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't just business, it was personal. James is done. Every major news outlet is covering the story. He's already trying to run damage control, but it's too late. Elena exhaled, letting the words sink in. A part of her wanted to celebrate, to relish the victory that had once seemed impossible. But another part of her hesitated, the weight of the past still lingering like a shadow at the edges of her mind. What did it mean to finally be free? Did she even know how to live without the constant fear of James lurking in the background? The thought both exhilarated and terrified her. She had spent so long fighting that she had never truly considered what came after. Was she ready for this new chapter, whatever it might hold? She had dreamed of this moment, had longed for it in the quiet loneliness of sleepless nights. But now that it was here, reality felt surreal. Could it really be over? Could she finally move forward without the constant fear of looking over her shoulder? It's hard to believe, she admitted. For so long, I thought he'd always be a shadow over my life. Michael took a seat across from her, his expression softer now. He won't be. Not anymore. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since the chaos unfolded. He had done this for her, fought for her when no one else would. She had spent years learning to rely only on herself, but Michael had shattered that notion with a single choice. You didn't have to do this, she said quietly. His brow arched. Yes, I did. Elena shook her head. No, you could have walked away. You had no reason to fight this battle. Michael leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. I had every reason. The air between them shifted, heavy with words unspoken. Elena's heart pounded, not with fear, but with something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Hope. I don't know what happens next, she admitted. For the first time in years, I don't have a plan. Michael smiled, that rare, genuine smile that made her chest tighten. It reminded her of something long buried, of fleeting moments of warmth she had once known, before the world had taught her to be wary. For years, she had associated smiles with deception, with empty words meant to manipulate. But Michael's was different. It wasn't calculated, wasn't a mask. It made her feel seen, safe, in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. And that terrified her just as much as it comforted her. Then let's figure it out together. She searched his face for hesitation, but found none. There was something steady in his gaze, something unwavering. Michael had fought battles of his own, had known betrayal and loss. Yet here he was, choosing her, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. And for someone like Elena, who had spent so long feeling disposable, that meant everything. He wasn't offering empty promises or temporary comfort. He meant it. And for once, she let herself believe it. Maybe it was the way Michael had stood by her side, unwavering even when she had pushed him away. Maybe it was the way he had fought for her, not out of obligation, but because he truly cared. She had spent so long expecting disappointment, anticipating betrayal, that the idea of someone choosing her, without conditions, without ulterior motives, felt almost foreign. But Michael was different. He had proven it, time and time again. And this time, for the first time in years, she was ready to trust. As she reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his, she realized something. This wasn't just about redemption. It wasn't just about defeating James Sterling or reclaiming her life. It was about love. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to embrace it. Love had always been a fragile concept for her, something distant and uncertain. But as Michael's fingers tightened gently around hers, grounding her in this new reality. She realized that love wasn't about certainty. It was about choosing to stay, choosing to fight, choosing to trust. And with him, she was willing to take that risk. The days that followed James Sterling's downfall were unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. The world seemed brighter, lighter, as if the storm that had loomed over her for years had finally passed. But with freedom came an unfamiliar stillness, one that left her questioning what came next. She had fought so hard for survival that she had never considered what it meant to truly live. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. There were no threatening messages, no shadows lurking in the corners of her mind. The weight that had anchored her to the past had finally been lifted, and yet she found herself standing in the quiet aftermath, wondering what came next. Lucas was the first to sense the shift. He no longer clung to her anxiously when she dropped him off at school, no longer asked if they would have to pack their bags in the middle of the night. Instead, he spoke with excitement about his favorite subjects, his growing collection of books, and a class trip he wanted to go on, things that normal children talked about. Seeing him so carefree made Elena realize how much of his childhood had been stolen by her fears. He no longer clung to her anxiously when she dropped him off at school, no longer asked if they would have to move again. Instead, he talked about his new friends, his favorite books, and even a class project he was excited about. Seeing her son finally at peace made Elena realize just how much they had both been holding their breath for years. And then there was Michael. He remained a steady presence, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give. His quiet reassurances, the way he looked at her as if he saw every part of her, the strong, the broken, the hesitant, made something deep inside her thaw. She had always thought love was conditional, something fleeting that could be taken away. But Michael was proving her wrong, one patient moment at a time. He hadn't pushed her to make any decisions, hadn't asked for more than she was ready to give. But he was there, steadfast, patient, and unyielding in his support. Every day he checked in on her, offering quiet reassurances with his presence. She didn't know how to name what was happening between them, but she knew it was real, it was solid. One evening, Michael took her and Lucas out of the city. The drive was peaceful, the hum of the engine and the quiet melodies from the radio filling the silence. Elena watched Lucas in the rearview mirror, his eyes shining with curiosity as the landscape changed from towering buildings to open fields and quiet suburban streets. She turned to Michael. Curiosity piqued, but he only smiled knowingly. He didn't tell them where they were going, only that it was a surprise. When they arrived, Elena found herself standing in front of a charming house, nestled in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. "What is this place?" she asked, turning to Michael. He smiled, tucking his hands into his pockets. "A fresh start, a home if you want it. No pressure, no expectations. Just a place where you and Lucas can be safe, where you can build the life you deserve." Elena swallowed hard, emotions swelling in her chest. She had never dared to dream of something like this. A home that wasn't temporary, a life that wasn't built on fear. Lucas tugged on her sleeve, his eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, can we live here?" She looked down at her son, then back at Michael. There was no hesitation in his gaze, no doubt. He was offering her something she had never truly believed she could have, not just security, but a future. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, I think we can." The words felt foreign yet right, as if she were stepping into a life she had once believed was out of reach. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but they weren't tears of fear or grief. They were tears of possibility. Michael exhaled, a smile breaking across his face, but he didn't rush toward her, didn't make any grand declarations. He simply stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers. "Then let's build something together." As the sun set behind them, casting a golden glow over the house, Elena felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. This wasn't just about escaping the past anymore. It was about creating something new, something worth holding on to. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to dream. She had fought for this, for herself, for Lucas, and for the possibility of love. And for the first time, she truly believed it was a fight worth winning. "We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from?" Let us know in the comments below. We always enjoy connecting with our amazing audience from all around the world. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more captivating content like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you more inspiring stories. Thank you so much for watching. We truly appreciate